Hi, who am I speaking with, please?
David Cole.
David, you recently wrote a book.
Yes, Less Safe, Less Free, Why America is Losing the War on Terror.
And how is it that you're able to say that America is losing the war on terror?
Well, we wrote this book because we've now had 6 years of experience with how the Bush administration's response to 9/11 has worked or not worked. And so we've got a record that we can actually examine. And no one has yet actually comprehensively sought to look at that record. And when you do look at that record, it's quite clear there's very little evidence that the government has much to show for itself in terms of actual terrorists captured, actual plots foiled, and there's a substantial degree of reason to believe that it has actually made us less safe by virtue of the blowback effects, the reactions that some of its measures have caused.
You're saying reason to believe, but is there empirical evidence one way or another?
Well, there is. First of all, there's evidence that the tactics haven't worked in terms of capturing terrorists. So, for example, the government in the first 2 years after 9/11 locked up over 5,000 foreign nationals in anti-terrorism preventive detention measures. It called in 8,000 men for interviews by the FBI simply because they're from Arab and Muslim countries. It called in 80,000 for special registration, again, simply because they were from Arab and Muslim countries. Again, on the theory, we might find a terrorist. Of those 5,000 men detained, 8,000 interviewed, 80,000 registered, not a single one stands convicted of a terrorist offense today. And then you can also measure the sort of blowback effects in terms of anti-Americanism. The Pew Charitable Trust and other entities take polls on a regular basis on the world's attitudes towards America, and what they show is that after 9/11 there was a remarkable amount of sympathy for the United States as a victim of this horrific attack, but each year since then anti-Americanism has risen in large part because people believe the United States is responding in ways that are unjust, that are unfair, that are failing to abide by basic principles of rule of law and imposing burdens and obligations on others that we would not tolerate for ourselves.
You talk about anti-Americanism. That's an attitude. Is there evidence that this translates into an unsafe condition for America?
Sure. I mean, that's, if you ask why do people target the United States for terrorist attacks, it's because of resentment of the United States. And you look at Iraq, a war which we started, which the world understood to be unjust and has spawned more terrorist attacks than probably any other act we have taken. And people have studied the life histories of many of the people who've gone and committed suicide bombings in Iraq, and they find that many of them come from outside of Iraq, that they've been sort of drawn there by our intervention.
But President Bush probably wouldn't be concerned about that. His thesis is fight them over there instead of here. So if there's terrorism going on in Iraq and it's not going on here, wouldn't that support his thinking that he's doing a good job?
Well, if you think that sacrificing 3,700 American lives thus far and 70,000 Iraqi civilian lives thus far is a just response, maybe. But it also suggests that there's a kind of zero-sum game, that if a terrorist is in Iraq, the terrorist is not going to be attacking U.S. interests elsewhere. And that's simply not true. I mean, we've seen in the past that when you create training grounds for terrorists, they go on from there to use those tools against us in other ways. We trained terrorists in Afghanistan, and they turned around and took action against us on 9/11. So the fact that there are terrorists in Iraq is a problem for the United States. It's a problem for U.S. casualties, more casualties in Iraq than for the U.S. than in 9/11 thus far, and there's no suggestion that somehow they're going to Iraq and not attacking U.S. interests elsewhere.
The president's supporters do point out that there hasn't been a major attack since 9/11 on U.S. soil. What do you make of that?
Well, that's true, and I'm grateful for that, and I think we're all grateful for that. I hope we can continue to say that for the foreseeable future. But I think, what you've got to ask is what's the causal effect of that? And when you've got the government adopting measures that, for example, round up 80,000 people, 8,000 people, 5,000 people, and not one of them turns out to be a terrorist, it's hard to say that those measures are in any way a cause of the fact that there hasn't been another terrorist attack. After all, there were 8 years between the first attack on the World Trade Center and the second attack on the World Trade Center.
You're talking about the president's policies not working. If it turned out that he could demonstrate that these policies were successful, would you still object to these policies?
Well, I think there's two really, I would fight the hypothetical a little bit. I think first is I think there's two grounds upon which to object, at least, to the Bush strategy. The first is on a matter of principle, that we have sacrificed fundamental commitments of the rule of law that this country was founded upon, that the international order is founded upon: equality, transparency, fair processes, checks and balances, fundamental human rights. And that's wrong no matter what the results are. But in addition, when you look at the results are suggest that this has been a colossal failure from a security standpoint. So I think in this case it's wrong both as a matter of principle and as a matter of practical results. But the reason I want to fight the hypothetical is that in some part the reason that it has been unsuccessful is because it violates these fundamental principles and is seen by so many as an illegitimate response to terrorism. If you adopt illegitimate responses, you're bound to have the kind of blowback effect that we've seen.
How difficult will it be for the United States to reverse the Bush administration's policies if that's what the United States decides to do?
I think it'll be very difficult. I think just as it'll be difficult to extricate ourselves from the mess that we've made of Iraq, it's going to be extremely difficult for us to rehabilitate the United States image after what has gone on thus far. It's going to take some dramatic moves to do it. I don't think that it's impossible, but I think it's going to take a lot of work over a long period of time. It takes a lot of hard work to build up a reputation. It takes a few, bad acts to ruin a reputation, and here we've had a lot of bad acts over a long period of time.
Would an effort to impeach the president help in that regard?
I don't. Not if it didn't go anywhere, and I don't think an effort to impeach the president is likely to go anywhere. So I think that we should be focusing on who the next president is. I think we should be focusing on continuing to bring to light injustices, amending some of the laws that have been enacted that are so problematic. The Military Commissions Act and the Protect America Act. The first gutted habeas corpus. The second gave the president the power to engage in warrantless wiretapping on Americans. I think that's where we ought to be focused, and I think that those are some things that are doable. I don't think impeachment is really in the cards.